Welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. I am absolutely thrilled for today's explainer, environmental impact and selection guidelines, because we are finally crossing a massive bridge. We're taking all those theoretical spreadsheet metrics we've been staring at and bringing them into the real, messy world of hardware procurement. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by endless spec sheets and vendor hype, well, you're in exactly the right place.
So, if you recall our previous lesson, measuring and optimizing hardware efficiency, we spent a lot of time looking at performance per watt, thermal management, and how to basically squeeze every last drop of performance out of a single machine. It's a key part of our Bitcoin mining hardware essentials module, right inside the broader Bitcoin fundamentals track. But here's the thing. Measured efficiency is really just chapter 1. Today is about translating those pure performance metrics into actual multi-million-dollar buying decisions. We have to balance tight budgets, return on investment, and environmental impact without losing our minds, our shirts, or, blowing up the local power grid.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the vehicle fleet metaphor, then break down the big 3 trade-offs, move into normalizing our numbers, build a real procurement scorecard, and wrap up with gating criteria.
Section 1. The vehicle fleet metaphor. To make sense of thousands of miners running simultaneously, I want you to completely stop thinking about them as computers sitting in a rack. Instead, imagine you're managing a massive fleet of commercial vehicles. The mapping is actually perfect. When you look at an ASIC miner's hash rate, just think of that as the size of the vehicle's engine. It tells you the raw work it can do. The energy consumption, the watts it pulls from the wall, well, that's your fuel efficiency or your miles per gallon. And the capital cost, the actual price you're paying the vendor, that is simply the vehicle's sticker price on the lot. What's really fun about this metaphor is just how well it holds up when we get into the weeds. Think about firmware tuning. That's basically like bolting on aerodynamic adjustments to reduce highway drag. What about cooling improvements on a miner that runs blistering hot? You've essentially just slapped upgraded high-efficiency tires on your truck. You're getting better effective fuel economy without changing the sticker price of the vehicle itself. And at the end of the road, end-of-life disposal maps perfectly to vehicle salvage value and the environmental cost of the scrapyard. And honestly, this metaphor completely dictates your purchasing strategy. If you're operating in a region where electricity is practically free, you don't need top-tier fuel economy, right? You're basically running a fleet of high-mileage taxis. You just want cheap, easily replaceable units. Purchase price is everything. But if your power costs are sky high and you plan to run these machines for years, you are managing a long-distance logistics truck fleet. In that case, you will happily pay a premium sticker price up front for top-tier fuel efficiency because those operational fuel savings are going to compound massively over time. Section 2. The big 3 trade-offs. Now, in hardware selection, you absolutely have to balance competing real-world metrics. It is literally impossible to get the cheapest, fastest, and most environmentally friendly machine all at once. There's always a catch. This brings us to the big 3 axes of trade-off. First, capital expenditure, or CapEx. Second, operating energy, or OpEx. And third, life cycle environmental emissions measured in CO2 equivalents. A lower upfront CapEx usually means you're stuck with higher OpEx through worse efficiency or maybe a shorter lifespan. Conversely, a highly efficient machine lowers your OpEx but spikes your initial CapEx, and it might even use exotic, hard-to-recycle materials that drive up its lifecycle CO2 footprint. It's a constant balancing act. Which brings us to Section 3, normalizing the numbers. So, how do we fairly judge a cheap, power-hungry miner against a super expensive, ultra-efficient one? If we just look at raw spec sheets, it's overwhelming. We need an apples-to-apples comparison. Enter the magic number of procurement, 1 billion, specifically 1 billion hashes. Converting all of our wildly varying costs, lifespans, and emissions into a single standardized unit, the expected cost and emissions per 1 billion hashes is the golden rule of hardware procurement. It cuts right through the marketing hype and gives us the raw truth.
So, the crucial point is exactly how we do this math. First, we compute the total expected hashes the machine will produce over a standard baseline. Let's use 36 months of useful life as our standard. And we absolutely have to factor in projected network difficulty growth, because mining gets harder over time, right? Next, we combine the measured energy consumption with our specific local electricity price to get the true OpEx. Finally, we take the vendor's declared manufacturing emissions, add the operational emissions from our local power grid, and amortize that entire CO2 footprint across our 1 billion hash standard.
Section 4. Building your procurement scorecard.
With our metrics beautifully normalized down to that 1 billion hash standard, it is time to build a weighted scorecard. Look, procurement teams answer to a lot of different stakeholders. Finance wants ROI, operations wants easy maintenance, and sustainability officers want reduced emissions. This step-by-step scoring workflow is what keeps everyone objective. You gather your measured efficiency, normalize the metrics, apply agreed-upon policy weights, and finally, draft a short, defensible rationale. This entirely stops people from just pointing at the machine with the highest hash rate and shouting, "Hey, let's just buy that one."
And this brilliantly illustrates why this works. Look at our candidates. Model A is cheap up front, with a capex of just $120, but its opex is a total nightmare at $220. Model B hits your wallet hard initially, with a capex of $200, but its incredible opex of $150 more than makes up for it over those 36 months. When we run the normalized numbers through our weighted formula, the highly efficient Model B comes out on top with a score of 78, easily beating out the cheap Model A and the balanced Model C.
But remember, these weighting percentages are not carved in stone. In that last example, we favored OPEX at 40%. But let's say you're running a heavily sustainability-focused operation. You might decide to bump the CO2 emissions weight up to 40% and lower the CapEx weight. Just changing that one organizational policy weight can completely flip the winner on your scorecard. You absolutely must tailor the weights to your actual operational reality.
Section 5, Gating Criteria and Contingencies. Now we arrive at the absolute most critical step of the selection process. I like to think of this step as the strict bouncer at an exclusive club. Because honestly, no matter how beautiful the math looks on your scorecard, and no matter how high a machine scores, there are qualitative factors that can instantly kill a deal. If a candidate fails a gating criterion, the bouncer throws it out of the club immediately, 0 exceptions. So, what do these gating criteria actually look like in practice? Well, imagine buying that top-scoring Model B we just talked about, only to discover its physical dimensions literally do not fit into your facility's racks. At that point, it's not a highly efficient miner, it's just a very expensive space heater. Other critical gates include requiring a minimum 24-month warranty, ensuring spare parts can be shipped within 6 months, and confirming the unit perfectly matches your site's specific voltage and power infrastructure. If it fails any of these, it is completely off the table. Now, once the bouncer has cleared the room of the unqualified machines, you have to stress test your winner. You have to ask the difficult questions. What happens if our electricity prices spike by 2 cents next year? What if the network difficulty explodes and our expected 36-month lifespan suddenly shrinks to 24 months? Robust procurement isn't just about picking a winner for today. It's about running sensitivity analyses to ensure your choice actually survives a hostile tomorrow. Once you have fully tested your winner, you craft your final deliverable. This should just be a tight, single-paragraph procurement note. First, you state the winner and its composite score. Second, explicitly note the sensitive assumptions, like the maximum power cost it can withstand. Third, confirm it passed all the bouncer's gating criteria. And finally, add a few integration notes for the operations team, detailing installation or recycling logistics. A flawlessly crafted procurement rationale sentence is the gold standard here. When you hand this type of logic to the finance team or an external auditor, they don't see guesswork. They see a professional, objective, and fully defensible logic chain. It proves exactly why this hardware fits your constraints, understated, testable assumptions. No arguments, just solid engineering and financial logic. Let's zoom out a bit and see how this builds into our broader curriculum. Because now that we have our finalized, rock-solid hardware choice in hand, we are ready to scale up. In our next lesson, in the Bitcoin Mining Process and Challenges module, we're going to take these specific per-unit hardware profiles and multiply them to estimate total facility-level cooling, aggregate electrical demand, and site-wide operational planning. It's going to be a big one. But before we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought regarding that vehicle fleet metaphor. When the hash rate finally drops and your fleet of miners reaches the end of its road, what environmental legacy will your operational decisions leave behind? Will it be a massive pile of toxic e-waste or a carefully managed recycling pipeline? The choices you make on your scorecard today literally dictate the reality of tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I strongly encourage you to visit forge.college to master this framework, explore our other learning programs, and dive deeper into the fascinating world of Web3. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.